All right, let me get settled for a second. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 81 years old. I live in Baltimore. Same city, same neighborhood. I worked most of my life at the docks, then later on nights as a security guard. I'm retired now, if you can call it that. Mostly, I just have time. A lot of it, which is something I didn't appreciate when I was younger. I'm sitting here talking to a camera because there are things I ignored for a long time. Not because I didn't hear them, because I didn't want to. That's different. A year ago, my wife Eleanor died. We were married for more than 50 years. When you lose someone after that long, you don't just lose a person. You lose a witness. Someone who saw who you were before you learned how to explain yourself. Since she's been gone, a lot of old moments have come back to me. Not memories I'd forgotten, ones I pushed aside, warnings I noticed and chose to ignore. That's what this is about. People talk about life lessons like they're hidden, like you have to search for them. That wasn't my experience. The important ones showed up clearly, repeatedly. I just kept walking past them. I told myself I was busy. I told myself I'd deal with things later. I told myself ignoring something wasn't the same as choosing wrong. I was wrong about that too. One of the first lessons I ignored was about listening, not hearing. Listening. I heard Eleanor all the time. I just didn't always listen to what she was actually saying. When she said she was tired, I heard complaints. When she said she felt lonely, I heard mood. When she said we needed to talk, I heard inconvenience. I thought listening meant waiting for my turn to respond. I didn't understand that real listening means being willing to change what you plan to say. She tried to tell me things gently, then clearly, then less often. By the time I realized the pattern, silence had already taken over. That regret doesn't fade, it just changes shape. Another lesson I ignored was about my body. For years it gave me warnings, small ones at first, pain that came and went, fatigue I brushed off, tightness I treated like weakness. I grew up believing you don't complain about your body. You use it until it stops. That worked until it didn't. By the time I took it seriously, the damage was already done. I didn't ruin myself overnight. I wore myself down slowly, proudly, and without asking whether it was necessary. I regret not treating my body like something I had to live in for a long time. The third lesson I ignored was about presence. I told myself that being physically there was enough, that sitting in the same room counted, that silence meant comfort. What it often meant was distance. I missed chances to ask better questions, to stay engaged when it was easier to shut down, to be curious instead of tired. I convinced myself that showing up was the same as connecting. It isn't. Connection requires effort. And effort was something I was always saving for work. Another lesson I ignored had to do with pride. I thought pride kept me standing. What it really did was keep me from admitting when I was wrong, scared, or overwhelmed. Pride doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like refusing help because you don't want to owe anyone anything. I ignored how much that pride was costing me until the bill arrived all at once. There were also lessons about time that I ignored because they felt abstract. People say time moves fast. That sounds like a saying. It doesn't sound like a warning. Time doesn't rush. It just doesn't stop. I assumed there would always be more normal days, more regular conversations, more chances to say small things that matter. I didn't realize how final later can be. Most of the regret I carry isn't about big mistakes. It's about small moments I dismissed, conversations I shortened, feelings I postponed, signals I noticed and decided weren't urgent. Urgency has a way of showing up after it's too late. I'm not telling you this to be dramatic. I'm telling you because ignoring lessons doesn't erase them. It just delays the cost. In the second part, I'm going to talk about which regrets stayed with me, which ones faded, and why some lessons still hurt even after you finally understand them. Some regrets fade with time. Others don't. They just settle in, like furniture you didn't choose, but now have to live around. I used to believe regret was something you could resolve, that if you understood it well enough, it would loosen its grip. What I learned instead is that understanding doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it just brings clarity, and clarity can be heavy. One of the regrets that stayed with me is how often I chose being tired over being present. I told myself exhaustion was a good reason to disengage. I worked hard. I earned my silence. That's how I justified it. What I didn't see was how predictable that choice became. Every evening, the same pattern. Sit down, say little, let the day end without really participating in it. At the time, it felt harmless. Looking back, it feels like absence. You don't notice presence until it's gone. And once it's gone, you can't recreate it, no matter how clearly you understand what you should have done. Another regret that never fully left is how often I ignored discomfort because it didn't feel urgent. Emotional discomfort, mostly. Conversations that made my chest tighten. Questions I didn't want to answer honestly. Moments where I knew something was wrong, but not wrong enough to force action. Discomfort is quiet when it first shows up. That's why it's easy to ignore. It doesn't demand anything. It just waits. And if you keep ignoring it, it grows into something that can't be handled calmly anymore. I regret confusing calm with health. Just because things weren't exploding didn't mean they were okay. I also regret how long it took me to understand that people change, even when you don't. I assumed relationships were stable by default, that if no one left, everything was fine. I didn't realize relationships require maintenance, even when nothing seems broken. You don't lose people only through conflict. You lose them through neglect, through distance that grows slowly enough to feel normal. By the time you notice it, you're already strangers in small ways. That realization hit me hardest after Eleanor was gone. There were things we understood about each other without words. And there were things we never talked about because I kept assuming there would be more time. That assumption still hurts. I regret how much I trusted routine. Routine can keep your life functioning, but it can also hide decay. If you do the same thing every day, it becomes harder to notice when meaning slips out of it. I stayed busy enough to avoid reflection. I stayed productive enough to feel justified. I didn't realize I was also staying distracted. One of the lessons I ignored for the longest time was that no one is coming to interrupt your life and tell you to wake up. There is no announcement, no signal that feels official enough to act on. If you're waiting for certainty before making changes, you're going to wait forever. I ignored that lesson because uncertainty made me uncomfortable. I preferred familiar dissatisfaction over unfamiliar honesty. That choice felt safe. It wasn't. Another regret that stayed with me is how often I assumed I understood myself. I thought self-awareness was something you earned just by living long enough. It isn't. You can live decades without really examining why you do what you do. I didn't ask myself hard questions until life forced them on me. Why did I avoid certain topics? Why did I shut down when emotions got close? Why did I define myself so narrowly that anything outside that definition felt threatening? Those questions didn't change the past, but they did explain it. An explanation, even without resolution, has value. There's also regret in knowing that some lessons don't arrive until you no longer have many chances to apply them. That's the part people don't like to talk about. Learning late isn't the same as learning early. Some doors don't reopen just because you finally understand why they closed. That doesn't mean learning late is useless. It just means it's bittersweet. I don't regret everything. Some things turned out better than I deserved. But the regrets that stayed are the ones tied to attention. Where I placed it, where I withheld it, where I assumed it wasn't needed. Attention is the real currency of a life. Not money, not time. Attention. Where you put it decides what grows and what disappears quietly. I ignored that lesson for too long. Now, my days are simpler, quieter, slower. I don't ignore things the way I used to. When something feels off, I sit with it instead of pushing it away. When a thought keeps returning, I listen to it instead of labeling it inconvenient. That doesn't erase regret. It just keeps me from adding to it. If you're younger than me and you hear yourself in any of this, I'm not telling you to panic. Panic doesn't help. I'm telling you to notice. Notice what you're avoiding. Notice what you keep postponing. Notice where you're relying on later a little too comfortably. Ignoring lessons doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Staying ignorant after you notice them, that's a choice. I made that choice many times, and I still regret it. Not because my life was bad, but because it could have been more attentive, more present, more honest in small daily ways that matter more than people admit. Some regrets fade. These didn't. That's all I wanted to say.